Carol, thank you for joining us on the Housing Collective podcast. It's lovely to see you. For the listeners, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and your organisation?
I like the word brief. Right, Carol Matthews, Group Chief Executive of the Riverside Group, which is a housing association group of companies with a charitable housing association at its heart. We have a Scottish subsidiary, so I get to make the joke that we're international. Big care and support business. With the One Housing Group merger, we think we might be the biggest now in street homeless services. And whilst we're doing all of that, we also build homes for sale and shared ownership. So I kind of describe the group as covering the safety net to the springboard.
That is brilliant. And the reason why I said brief, Carol, is that I want to know more about your career. So talk to us about kind of your career, how it all started, and also why housing? Why did you choose this sector?
40 years ago, I got a bit shocked, which is I got a double first from Glasgow University in modern history and economic history. One is a social science and one is an art subject in a Scottish setting. And suddenly offers of PhDs came, but they weren't going to start until the following year. So I had a year and a bit to fill. And it is this thing about networks. Tom, my pal, was moving to Sheffield where her husband had moved for a job with the council. And he told her to tell me to have a look in The Guardian because Sheffield City Council was advertising 100+ posts. In Scotland, The Guardian was not a newspaper that I would have picked up. So it is that thing about the network and the nudge that I went out and I bought The Guardian on that Wednesday and I applied to Sheffield City Council for a job in the housing department. So I didn't really choose housing. I was looking for two objectives. First one was a job, and then the second one was somewhere that was far enough away from Glasgow that I didn't need to stay at home and that I could actually break out from the nest. But once I got to Sheffield City Council as a management officer, I knew inside 3 months that this was the thing I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. And actually, I don't think it's the housing bit. I think it's the customer service piece for me, which is helping people to get problems sorted and the outcomes that they wanted. And I think that I've always really enjoyed advocacy, helping others. And then on top of that, all the stuff to do with housings and neighbourhoods and estates and buildings, I loved as well. But for me, it was the ability to help people that completely and utterly grabbed me. I think an awful lot of people fall into the sector rather than choosing it. I definitely didn't choose it. But once I was in it, I kind of felt like it chose me.
I think that's such a fair comment as well, because many people that we have on the podcast say exactly that it wasn't did finish university or finish school and go, I want to be in housing. It just ends up you falling into it, and then, like I say, you fall in love with the sector as well. And talking about your journey, then, Carol, I think we can both agree that no journey is ever plain sailing. So, talk to us a bit about some of those challenges that you faced on your journey to becoming chief executive, and then how did you overcome them?
So I think that where I've had the biggest difficulties, Tom, has always, when you boil it down, is about culture and behaviours. Where there's been a mismatch between me and either the organisation's culture, or I think I am the classic example of being driven to promotion to leave a boss, or thinking that the person who was nominally in charge of me, I could do their job, and in some occasions thought I was doing their job a bit better. So for me, it's always been about, the gap's been about culture and behaviours. So I've also, I think, really benefited mainly from men actually being kind and mentoring me. I'm one of the first people to actually, I suppose, give me a prod was the Director of Housing at Sheffield City Council, who one day was on my estate doing a walkabout because I was pretty successful at spending other people's money. And we had a huge, big grant from the government to do up this estate. And as we were walking around, he said to me, I've really been enjoying watching your journey. Because by that point, I think I was on my third or fourth promotion. He said, but to get to be a director, Carol, you need to leave. You can't become a director in Sheffield and be homegrown. Now, actually, that's wrong. You need to leave. You need to widen your experience base to get on. And I suppose for me, Tom, that there was two things there. He gave me advice that I hadn't asked for, but he told me that I had the potential to be a director. And nobody had said that. And bang. Inside 3 months, I had a new job, and it was in Burnley. And I got there, and I thought this was the worst thing I've ever done, because the cultural gap between me and how Burnley Council was run was huge. It was still very old-fashioned. They still published lists of people who'd been served with a notice of seat and possession on the town hall notice board. So it was a real shaming kind of culture. And I knew within about 4 days of arriving in Burnley that this wasn't going to work for me. And so what I did was two things. First thing was really focus on delivering the outcomes that they wanted, which was decentralisation of the housing department, which I did inside 6 months. And the second thing was looking for a new job. And I got out inside a year, but I had actually delivered what they asked me to deliver. So yeah, culture for me is the big issue, and being managed by somebody that over time I start to respect less has often then driven me to get a different job. And before kids arrived, I think what I also did was, once I'd made a huge move, which was the move from Scotland to England, then moving around cities and towns didn't really fuss me, because I knew that I'd made the really big move. So moving 60 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles, it was neither here nor there. And I think I was also lucky that my partner was really up for moving around the country with me. And that's what we did before kids arrived. Once the kids arrived, lots of things changed. And what I then had to be was more patient about the next job, because I very quickly realised that these little special people that we had produced actually needed, or I wanted them to have, a very stable upbringing in the same village, go to the same schools, have the same friends all the way through their school journey, which then meant I then had to find jobs that I could travel to from home. And then that just changed my perspective. And I suppose what I learned was patience and being resilient in the face of working with people that you might not respect very much.
It's really interesting, Carol, because I'm about to ask you about kind of present day, and you've been chief executive of Riverside now for over 12 years. So you look at, in regards to setbacks now as a chief executive, and you mentioned the word network earlier, but a lot of chief execs say to me, it can be at times a really lonely job at the top, with the need to have that incredible resilience, particularly given the current operating environment. So how do you deal with setbacks as chief executive, and then obviously dust yourself down and move forward as an organisation?
There's plenty of dusting goes on. So I think there's two words that I would use. Is the first word is you're always alone. There is only one chief executive. I've felt the aloneness more probably when my executive team haven't been of one mind. So, when you've got your team have a differential range of views about how something should be tackled, and everybody's lobbying you, you get very much a sense of, oh God, this is my call and I am alone in this decision. Actually, the loneliness has been less, I think, because I've worked really hard to finish my career with the best team I've ever had. And I do feel part of that team, as well as being the boss. I am part of that team and I am supported by that team individually and collectively. And I would say to chief execs, that's part of your job, is to develop your exec directors individually and then as the collective. So I think that's how I've dealt with the loneliness, is endeavour to get good people round me. But when things are really tough, and that's usually when you've reported yourself to the regulator, or what we've experienced over the Christmas holiday is, filling the newspapers and the TV with rats and damp and mold stories, is, I suppose, what I've learned is, after I've heard the story once or twice, don't pick the scab. Don't turn on every single news item to just keep on crucifying yourself. Give yourself the perspective of, what that's about. Close it down now. And then I think the big thing is actually sitting down and really thinking through, what's the lessons to learn here, and could I have done anything different? Could I have shouted earlier that I didn't think this was going right or whatever? So for me, it's trying to make sure that you look for the lessons to learn and that you don't end up in Groundhog Day with the same things happening over and over again. And I know that I'm healing when I get to the point where I can make a joke about something. Might be bad humour, but it's part of my healing when I get to a point where I might say, well, I was a bit of a numpty about that, wasn't I? Or we should have done that better. But hey, it's people-to-people business. So things do go wrong. I think it is that thing about trying to be clear about where my actions, if I'd done something better, different earlier, would have made a difference. And then on some things, being really clear about where the responsibility and the accountability for something lies. But actually, as the chief executive, the buck stops with you.
Of course it does. So you also say, Carol, that you are currently working with the best executive team you've ever had. So what makes this executive team so good? And also, how you talk about the word development there. So how have you developed this executive team to create the best one that you've currently got?
So I think it's about setting the tone yourself, which is that, again, I said the word advocate, didn't I, very early on in this. Often in the bilateral arrangements between execs, people can fall out. He did that, she did that, I would have thought this. So that when people in one-to-ones share with me their frustration, anger, disappointment, grief about their colleague, is I will often advocate by saying, well, have you thought about it from their perspective? Have you stood in their shoes? They've said to me this, that, and the next thing. Have you maybe talked to them about it? And so often people don't talk to each other. I don't get it. I don't know if that's an English thing. I really don't. But it's like, well, why don't you start by talking to them? So there's a lot of kind of sometimes giving people a perspective that they haven't thought about, proposing that people talk to each other and work problems through, and then setting the tone in the team that we can have difficult conversations, that we can work problems through, that we can fall out about something, but do it professionally, that we've got different perspectives and try and work out what the compromise and working stuff through. And we've done some facilitated learning, which is often bringing somebody in. And quite a lot of that's about understanding the person, isn't it? The motives, the values, what gets on people's nerves. So, yeah, lots of work done individually. I take my role as a coach really, really seriously. And I endeavour, wherever possible, not to act down, because everybody's much more comfortable at the job that they previously did. So for me, I've always tried to make sure that I give the person doing customer service, housing, asset management the biggest gap, because the job will have changed since I did it, and endeavour not to do their job for them, because I'm being paid to be the chief, not the executive director. And so I guard myself with that, and quite a lot of the time I'll say, well, that's your decision. What do you want to do? And yeah, just try and be really open, be transparent, have fun as a team, and don't allow bitching.
And how do you create that safe space then, Carol? Because as you say there, it may be just English, but kind of having that safe space to have constructive debate, particularly when you're dealing with an area of conflict. How have you created that space at Riverside?
So I suppose by talking about the things that I get wrong, also sharing dilemmas. What are we going to do about this? Or the board are asking for that. The chair's feeling this. Where are we going with the consumer regulation on that? So actually kind of talking things through, working some of the kind of big hairy problems through, ensuring that planning, whether people want to or not, that the planning for board meetings and agendas is done collectively. Now, that's not about doing things by committee. All of that stuff is development for each of those individuals, because the governance piece is kind of a dark mystery, isn't it? And I try and make sure that there isn't any areas behind locked keys, and be really quite open about what's going well and what's going well. So that's how I think I've done it, is by being me, not somebody else, endeavouring to be authentic, and also being honest about when I'm scared, frightened, anxious, not sleeping. Then I'm upfront about that. I don't pretend that everything all the time is tickety-boo. And I think because I'm authentic, it helps people to be their authentic selves.
It's so powerful as well. And you talk about that, Carol, in regards to that power of authenticity, and also that you set the tone. But leading an organisation of such size and such scale must be really difficult. So naturally, you can't touch everyone or be involved in every decision that the organisation makes. So how do you really embed your values and also maintain that level of authenticity across the organisation?
So I was given a gift when I left Guinness, Tom, which was that my previous communications manager said to me, Carol, you've done your blog at Guinness a bit hit and miss. Don't think you realise how powerful it is as a tool, communicating the message and the value of the organisation, but actually that people get to know you through the fact that you share some of your personal stuff. And she said to me, the one thing that I should do at Riverside is do my blog faithfully. Now, at that point, at Guinness, I kind of did it monthly. But at the end of my first week, I did a blog, and I got such amazing feedback on it, which was just like, wow, the leader's communicating with us, and she's quite funny, and she's telling us about what she's doing this weekend. Is that I hadn't meant to do it weekly, but it got such an amazing reception on its first week that 12 years later, I still do it weekly apart from holidays. And I think, I know it's the most read thing at Riverside. And because of saying this weekend I'm doing this, or taking a child to university, or open days, or it's our wedding anniversary, is that everybody feels they know me a bit. And then new technology, this stuff, is that instead of just writing stuff, and I've encouraged my exec directors to do this, is a lot of stuff to video. So that way I can be in Kent or Cambridge, or up in Irvine or in Carlisle, because I'm only a screen away if you click. And I think that has been really, really powerful. But my gift to the next chief exec will be to say to them, you don't need to do what I've done, but you need to find your way of communicating with a workforce of 5,000 people that are spread all over the country.
And also that element of not only being, you can say your authenticity, but just being a genuinely nice human being, isn't it? It's kind of like, say, being so human and not thinking that, oh, that's Carol, the group chief executive. It's shall I go up to them? It's you being so human makes people kind of, I guess, just think of you as just a normal human being rather than the big chief executive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll say, oh God, this weekend it's chore city, or yet again I'm trying to declutter around the men in my life, or I'm going out to catch a haggis because it's Rabbieburns supper. It's you're just showing a bit of yourself, but you're right. You're doing the same things that other people are doing, whether that's going out and buy. So I used to, buy, because I could afford to, but I'd always buy 2 blazers and 2 gym kits, and you've got all this coming, Tom, because I knew that there would be a child at 8 o'clock in the morning going, I can only find 1 football sock. So that's how I would buy 5 sweatshirts and 3 pairs of trousers, just because of standing trying to iron things dry at 8:30 in the morning. And just sharing that with people has made a difference, because when I arrived, there was lots of people that thought I wasn't ordinary. So people would ask me, did I have a maid? Did I have a housekeeper? Did I have a gardener? Who did my shopping? Who did the cleaning? It's like, well, we do. My husband and I do. And we've been together at that point 20 odd years, and I've realised that nagging about spraying the sink ain't going to work. So I don't nag anymore. I just know at some point over the weekend, me and the bleach are going to get into the kitchen sink, because life's too short and it hasn't worked nagging. And you just try and be what all of us are being, which is getting food on the table, getting on with our personal lives and our professional lives, but actually allowing some of that insight, I think, has probably been much more powerful than I ever expected it to be. But people that I've never met before go, hiya, Carol. So I know that it means the tools have made a difference.
And it's great because you can see me smiling and laughing, Carol, because I can resonate with that exactly, because that's exactly what happened this weekend. So that's so no, that's great.
Tell Lisa that nagging don't work.
No work. Hopefully she'll listen to this as well. So that's great. And you talk 5,000 person workforce. You've grown Riverside to what it is today through M&A, and you've recently embedded One Housing into Riverside as well. So what are the lessons that you learn around cultural change, and also how do you get staff on a journey?
Oh God, that's a huge question. Again, I think it's about being straightforward. And I think it really helped that the One Housing Group board, particularly the chair, Caroline Corby, who's just about to become the Peabody chair, and we're so proud of her, was really straightforward about, we need a safe harbour. We could survive, and I wonder about that now that we've had inflation and the interest that we've had, but we're going to limp, and we actually want to get into a safe harbour. So they showed leadership. I think the fact that there'd been years where there wasn't any pay award, and Christmas was cancelled, I think, one year, is that colleagues at One Housing Group knew that things were very difficult. So I think that transparency and not pretending that everything was tickety-boo in the garden has really helped the cultural journey, Tom. And then we've been really straightforward about the fact that we have to drive out savings. We do need to integrate, and we have to drive out savings to be able to do the cladding work, the damp and mould, the regeneration. And so just being really straightforward about that, and that we're going to do it in chunks and it's going to take us some time, I think has been appreciated. But it is tricky because people want to know what's going to happen then, and we're doing chunk at a time. But again, I think being transparent, being open, and then look at how you try and blend the best of the two organisations. So I'm really proud of the fact that as a result of One Housing Group, diversity and being a diverse workforce is now one of our values, and care and trust. And I think because one had a big care and support business, which was really important to them, that's been a kind of natural affinity as well. So yeah, it's a tough journey. I think probably people at One Housing Group knew they needed to do a merger, but then culturally, it's not the big things, it's all the little things, isn't it? It's the little things that get on people's nerves. But we've tried to work that through bit by bit. And I'm not going to say that we've delivered one culture yet. We're a fair way away from that. And we're not yet one organisation. They're still on separate operational software. But we are on the journey and we will get there. And we're doing it, treating people with as much respect as we possibly can. Because everybody should be treated with respect. And just try and be as honest with people as you possibly can be. Would be what I would say we've endeavoured to work this merger through, and it has brought us short-term problems, which is all playing out in the financial accounts. But over the long term, this is a really good deal for Riverside because we've got such old properties. So I describe this deal as a long-term hedge against the Riverside business planning stock base. But M&A is really hard.
There's not,
it's fun
and there's not one size fits all as well, I could imagine.
Oh God, no. I mean, I do think it evolves all the time. So we've got an M&A due diligence list that gets improved after every piece of M&A. And it's definitely been improved by One Housing Group deal. I think the other thing that we've said is really clearly is we've shut. Until we've done this properly, we're not looking at any other M&A, despite the phone calls that we receive in the tricky times that we're now living in, Tom, is kind of make sure you've done what you said you were going to do. And our big thing is delivering the pledges that we've made to customers. And I'm really proud that the merger enabled £3 million per annum to get into damp and mould before the wee boy died, and that we've put 2.5 million increasing by CPI into tenancy sustainment, which has made a huge difference during the cost of living crisis. And that's ended up feeling like magic. When I get written to by a local authority, what the hell are you doing about damp and mould and the cost of living crisis? As a result of us creating those funds through the merger, I'm able to say, this is what we're doing. So yeah, there's a lot of work in M&A, but good things are in there as well.
And that due diligence checklist, if we can use that terminology, Carol, there's obviously it's grown through the M&A journeys that you've been on, but what are some of the non-negotiables that have always been on that checklist?
So for Riverside, in relation to the last 2 or 3, we're not changing our name, and we're not even going to go up a gum tree pretending that we're interested in changing our name, because the brand name is strong and it's powerful, and the longer you don't change it, the more you get people knowing the brand, the name, the organisation, the group. So that was a red line. Another big red line for Riverside has been that in those areas where we've done stock transfers, and that's where a local authority has trusted that we're going to be there for the long term, that we've then made sure that we've kept jobs in those localities. So, Carlisle transferred all of its housing stock to us. So Carlisle's one of our key hubs where we've got more than 100 plus staff located, and the same in Irvine, and the same in Hull, and the same in Liverpool, where we are, a big landlord and a big employer in those places where they're not as wealthy. We know it's really, really important to be part of that place. So that was the other red line. And then the third red line was we're in care and support, and it's got low margins. The answer isn't to get out of care and support. The answer is to love it and to actually drive the margin as much as you can. But we're in care and support, and we're not coming out of it until the metrics, the economics, whatever changes, we're in it. And quite rightly, some businesses have made a choice that it's too difficult, dirty and dangerous, some aspects, particularly the stuff that that's done on the streets. That's the stuff that we're really proud of, because we're back to the whole safety net, helping people off the street and back into society. So I would say they were the three: the name, the localities, and being in care and support were the three really big red lines for Riverside. And I think going forward, I would think that they would remain the red lines for a good while. And why am I sounding a little bit unsure? I suppose if there be, for whatever reason, has to be an M&A with a very big organisation, then name would be something. But I think the board believe and know from external research that the brand name is very powerful. So why would you choose? Why would you weaken your brand? You don't. You enhance it, don't you? So yeah, those are the three. But I think for anybody who's listening to this, is they might not be yours, but what you have to work out is what is your red lines. What are the children to be protected or whatever? What are you not prepared to negotiate away? And you need to do that before you do M&A, because it's quite painful to find out halfway through a transaction that something's a red line for you and you haven't mentioned it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you, Carolyn. And on the point of journeys, you personally decided that last year that you're going to retire after 12 years as Chief Executive of Riverside. So during those 12 years, and this is going to be a really difficult question, Carol, because I'm sure there's many things, but Riverside has obviously gone from strength to strength under your helm. But what are you most proud of when you look back at those 12 years?
I think I brought the customer to the table. I've made it one organisation. When I arrived, it was a federation, because it had come from lots of stock transfers and there was lots of subsidiaries with different names. So there was loads of names. If Riverside did something, they called it something different to Riverside. And I've spent 12 years getting rid of brands that aren't Riverside. So I think I've created one organisation. I spent a lot on modernisation of the organisation, its systems and its way of work. I've brought the customer to the table and the importance of the customer and customer service. And when I arrived in 2012, the board said it was up to me. What did I want to do with care and support? And I said, I want to love it and I want to bring it to the heart of the business. And I think we've done that as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think it was Fiona of L&Q on the podcast said a few months ago, Carol, that as a chief executive, you are in effect a trustee for the organisation and you pass the organisation in a better place to your successor. So what advice do you have for your successor? But also, what tips or advice do you give to that next generation of chief execs in the sector?
Wow. So I agree with Fiona. When I told my leadership group that I was leaving at the beginning of September, the last words I said, and I haven't written this down, it just was from the heart. My last sentence was, it's been a privilege to serve. And that's exactly what I feel, which is I love that housing associations are really long-term business if you do it right. And Riverside's been around for 95 years. So my advice to the next generation is leave it stronger than where you receive it. Do good things, do the right things by the customers and by your colleagues. And be really clear about mission. Be really, really clear about mission. And what I mean by that is don't just chase every single fad or everybody else. Don't be a lemming. Actually think about your organisation, where it is, what its purpose is, and that there's a lot right about sticking to the job and doing it really, really well. And then the final thing I would say to people is work out what metrics about your business are important to you. Is it employee engagement? Is it operating margin? What's your basket? And how do you measure your success based on what you and your board see as the key metrics? Because that helps you at troubled times. If in the middle of a storm, you've still got your basket of metrics, whether that's customer satisfaction, whatever it is that's in your basket, that they're still doing all right whilst you're being battered about your head with whatever issue or problem that you're in the middle of dealing with.
Fascinating. Thank you, Carol, and thank you for everything as well, because I think it's fair to say not only are you leaving Riverside in a better place than when you picked it up 12 years ago, the sector is in a better place because of you as well. So thank you as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Before I let you...
You made me feel all shy.
No, don't be silly. Don't be silly.
They're getting bashful. I'm turning into the dwarf that's called bashful.
Before I let you go, Carol, we do have some quick fire questions, and I did warn you before the session. So, what has been your most valuable leadership lesson that you've learned?
That you can't fix everything.
What advice would you give to an aspiring leader starting out on their journey?
Watch other leaders. Watch them closely. Observe what you think they do right and what they do wrong, and then think about what you would do in some of those scenarios. And I was told by one of my very first mentors is behave like the tier above you. So almost like start to behave like somebody more senior than somebody on your grade. And it's that thing about if you model the behaviours, they start to become your behaviours.
And what do you see, or what do you believe to be the key leadership qualities required in today's world?
Resilience. Probably resilience fitted with being yourself. It's really easy to pretend to be somebody else, but actually people see through that. And it's tough being yourself, particularly if you're in a culture where people don't like your class, your background, your interests, but actually be yourself because everybody else is taken.
That's a really good point. And final question, one leadership book recommendation you give to the listeners?
There's a guy called Kevin something, can't remember his second name, but it's all about authentic leadership. Kevin Cashman. So when I've mentored people, the leader awakens or the leader within, there's some stuff in Kevin that I found very powerful for me when I did my certificate in leadership at Lancaster University a long time ago. And it was all about your shadow self that sits on your shoulder and puts you down. You know, you don't need other people to put yourself down. You've got your little shadow that sits on your shelf going, you're garbage at that. You can't do this. You're garbage. And that for me was really, really powerful because I had that internal narrative going on. So actually making me see my own monster was really, really powerful for me. So yeah, Kevin Cashman is definitely somebody that is all about authentic leadership and being yourself.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And thank you for everything, Carol. And like I say, thank you for joining us on the Housing Collective podcast. And I look forward to seeing you soon as well.
You're most welcome. Thanks, Tom.